What if I told you that the world as we knew it quietly changed in one single day, not with a dramatic announcement, not with a declaration of war on live television, but with a series of decisions, miscalculations, and provocations that pushed the entire planet to the edge of something haven't seen since 1945. What you're about to hear is not fear-mongering. It is the clearest breakdown of how close we came and where things actually stand right now. Throughout history, world wars weren't born from one single event. They were born from pressure, years of tension, wounded pride, and broken trust, until one spark ignited everything. World War I started with an assassination in Sarajevo that most European leaders thought would stay local. World War II started with an invasion that the world believed would be contained. Both times, the world was wrong. And today, the warning signs have been building for years. Multiple active conflict zones, nuclear powers speaking openly about escalation, global supply chains fracturing under the weight of sanctions and rivalry, alliances being tested in ways they haven't been tested in decades, a trust between the world's superpowers sitting at historic lows. So the question isn't, could it happen? The question is, has something already begun and we're just not calling it by its name yet? Let's start with the flashpoints. The places on the map where the tension burns the hottest and where one wrong move could trigger a chain reaction that nobody can stop. The first flashpoint is Eastern Europe. The war in Ukraine did not stay in Ukraine. It became the largest proxy conflict between NATO and Russia since the Cold War. The most powerful military alliance on Earth squared off against the world's largest nuclear power. Weapons, intelligence, training, and money from dozens of countries have poured into this war. The battlefield stretches thousands of miles, but the decisions shaping it are being made in Washington, Brussels, and Moscow. And Russia has not held back on its warnings. Senior officials have invoked nuclear doctrine more times in the past 2 years than at any point since the Cuban Missile Crisis. That is not noise. That is a deliberate message, and the world has been listening. The second flashpoint is the Middle East. The region has always carried the potential for wider conflict, but recent escalations have drawn in more regional powers than at any point in modern history. Iran and its extensive network of proxy forces. Israel, direct military confrontations that have alarmed governments across the globe when missiles are flying across borders between nuclear-capable states and their allies. The calculations change fast, and so do the risks. The third flashpoint, and perhaps the most consequential of all, is the Taiwan Strait. China has been unambiguous for years. Taiwan will reunify with the mainland, by force if necessary. The United States has maintained an implicit and increasingly explicit commitment to Taiwan's defense. If both of those statements are true at the same time, and if either side decides to act on them, the consequences would be felt in every corner of the world. Military exercises in the Strait have intensified dramatically, naval standoffs are no longer rare, and the economic stakes are almost impossible to overstate. Taiwan produces the vast majority of the world's most advanced semiconductors. A conflict there wouldn't just be a regional war, it would be a disruption to the global economy and technological infrastructure, unlike anything the modern world has ever experienced. Here is what most people don't understand about how world wars actually start. They didn't begin because two great powers sat down and decided they wanted global domination. They begin because of miscalculation. Leaders assume the other side will back down. They assume their allies will stay neutral. They assume the conflict will stay contained. They assume wrong, and by the time they realize it, the machinery of war is already moving too fast to stop. In 1914, no one expected a regional dispute in the Balkans to pull in Britain, France, Germany, Russia, the Ottoman Empire, and eventually the United States. But each country had treaties, obligations, and national pride, and one by one, the dominoes fell. Today, the alliance structures are different, but the underlying logic is exactly the same. NATO's Article 5 commits every member nation to treat an attack on one as an attack on all. China and Russia have deepened their strategic partnership to a degree unseen since the Soviet era. Iran supports proxy forces across multiple conflict theaters simultaneously. North Korea has re-entered the global arms conversation in ways that would have seemed impossible a decade ago. The web of obligations and allegiances is enormous, and webs, when one strand is pulled hard enough, tend to collapse all at once. Now, to be fair, people have predicted World War III many times before, during the Korean War, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, during the tensest years of the Cold War, and each time it didn't happen. So why should this moment be taken seriously? Several reasons. First, nuclear proliferation. And during the Cold War, essentially two countries possessed nuclear weapons capable of ending civilization as we know it. Today, 9 countries have nuclear weapons, more actively attempting to acquire them. The more actors holding nuclear capability, the more pathways exist to catastrophic miscalculation, and the harder it becomes to manage every possible escalation scenario. Second, information warfare, modern great power conflict doesn't begin with missiles. It begins with cyber attacks crippling infrastructure, with disinformation campaigns fracturing societies from within, with economic sanctions and supply chain disruption used as weapons of coercion. These tools are already in active use right now between major powers. What we call gray zone warfare today may simply be the opening moves of something far larger. Third, economic interdependence cuts both ways. For decades, globalization was supposed to make large-scale war unthinkable, too economically costly for any rational actor to consider. But something has shifted. Economic weapons, sanctions, technology bans, trade wars have become primary instruments of foreign policy, and as major powers accelerate their economic decoupling from one another, they are also systematically removing the financial incentive not to fight. Fourth, the state of leadership and institutions. The international structures built after World War II, the United Nations, arms control agreements, diplomatic frameworks were specifically designed to prevent another catastrophic conflict. Today, those structures are under unprecedented strain. The UN Security Council is paralyzed by vetoes, landmark arms treaties have collapsed, diplomacy has been replaced by public ultimatums, and several key world leaders are operating under intense domestic pressure that can, historically, make foreign military adventurism look politically convenient. But this is not only a story of danger, because fear without understanding leads nowhere. So it's worth asking, what actually prevents world wars, and do those things still exist? Deterrence has worked before. The logic of mutually assured destruction kept the Cold War from turning hot for nearly 5 decades. That logic has not disappeared. No rational actor wants to trigger a nuclear exchange that destroys everyone, including themselves. Diplomacy still matters. Some of the most dangerous moments in modern history were resolved not on a battlefield, but through back-channel communications, private letters, and careful negotiation conducted far from the public eye. The Cuban Missile Crisis was 13 days of quiet, terrifying diplomacy, and it worked. Public pressure is real. Citizens in every major country, including Russia, China, and the United States, do not want their sons and daughters dying in a world war. That sentiment constrains governments, even authoritarian ones, more than those governments would ever publicly acknowledge. An economic reality still bites. A direct military conflict between great powers would collapse the global economy in ways that would devastate the aggressor as much as the victim. That remains a powerful brake on escalation. One, that rational actors on all sides understand World War III is not inevitable. History does not move on autopilot, and it is not predetermined, but it is also not prevented by luck or wishful thinking. It is prevented by active, serious, sustained attention from governments, from institutions, and from citizens who are paying attention and demanding better. The world is not at peace, but it is not yet in a world war. We are living in a dangerous, unstable, in-between moment where the decisions being made right now in capitals around the world will define what kind of future gets written. That is either terrifying or it is a reminder that history is still open, that the next chapter hasn't been written yet, and that an informed, engaged public is harder to mislead, harder to manipulate, and more likely to demand the kind of leadership that keeps the world back from the edge. Stay informed, stay engaged. The conversation continues.